Hi there, one is official when you're watching and listening to me live from UK. I'm pleased to have you on this platform, WOCON. Our objective is to protect and prevent the entire world from future and present pandemic crisis like COVID-19. Today on the program is about COVID-19 and the environment. What are the lessons we've learned so far? Because we cannot stop nature. That is a must. We can't stop the nature, but we can protect ourselves against the precautions or the measures of nature at this moment. On the program, so please having these great people. One is from America, one is from UK, a great man, a doctor in environmental issues. So I hope you learn a lot from this program. You can reach me on WOCON2020@gmail.com for further inquiries, because I need the word. I need everybody to support this project because I can't do it by myself. Especially, I need the medical people and the legal people on board. We have to help the world by ourselves. We need not to wait for somebody to come and prompt us that do that, do that, do that. We have to do it by ourselves, especially with the future leaders. I mean, the young people. We've got the strength to do things by ourselves. I love you and do well to stay tuned. Hello, doctor.
Hello.
Hi, Angie.
Hello.
Hi. How is America?
Oh, it's busy. There's a lot going on.
I know. Terrible ones, precisely. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for accepting my invite. Angie, thank you so much for accepting my invite also. I really appreciate you on board because you are very grateful people. You never look down upon the world. When I sent you the invitation, Doctor, I'll really bother you today because you are into environmental issues. Doctor, what do you mean by environment? Because I know from childhood education, environment is the things around us, but I don't know whether there have been advanced knowledge on what environment is.
Well, the term environment can be defined in different ways, but what it actually means is that it's referring to the things around us. So, for example, we have human beings on the planet Earth. So, what the human beings live in is the environment. So, we are looking at the Earth, which comprises of the soil or the land, the vegetation, the animals, the water. So we are referring to the living and non-living things that surround us. So together, when you look at the different components of the earth, we are looking at the environment.
So, Doctor, can this COVID-19 be part of environment issues? Your field of studies.
Of course, when you look at what has been happening and what has been going on in the media, one may actually think that COVID-19 is basically a human health and just maybe something to do with the economy. But in actual fact, the environment is at the center of what is happening in terms of COVID-19. First and foremost, let me mention that when you look at the virus that we are dealing with, these are viruses which are in the environment. And what I mean is that these are viruses which live in animals which we call the reservoirs. So when you go in, for example, in the forest, there are certain areas where these animals live. And these animals carry the viruses that we are referring to. In fact, the virus we are referring to as COVID-19. But what normally happens, what happens for these viruses to get in touch with human beings is that we tend to interfere with the environment in which these animals live. So, for example, when you degrade the forest, when you clear the forest, what you're actually doing is you are creating contact between human beings and the animals which are carrying these viruses. So you get the virus through when the virus jumps from animals to wild animals to human beings. We also tend to have this problem when you are involved in wildlife trade. So, for example, if you captured animals from the wild and decided to export them to other places, there's a possibility that those animals, if they are reservoirs, can actually transmit these viruses to other places. There are also other activities. For example, when you are involved in captive breeding, you get animals from the wild, you breed them and sell them to other people. If those animals are carrying the virus, there is a possibility that that virus will actually jump from the animals to human beings. And there's also a possibility that when you have animals, for example, livestock, you have cattle, you have goats, or any other animals that are domesticated, these animals can actually save us intermediate costs. So what that actually means is that there are animals which may provide certain conditions which will allow the virus to thrive. And if these animals are not managed properly, there is a possibility that the meat that we sell or the animal products that we sell may be carrying the virus. And in so doing, you actually expose the human beings to the virus. And there are other things. There are also cases where, for example, you abuse the use of drugs. And if you are using drugs, for example, in livestock production, and you don't use them properly, there's a possibility that you may have what we call antimicrobial resistance. And in so doing, instead of controlling the development of these viruses, you can actually provide a favorable environment for multiplication of these viruses, and in so doing, they may eventually get in touch with human beings. So the way we manage the environment also determines the extent to which we manage or we control the spread of these viruses.
Doctor, you are really broadening our ideology on these environmental issues. So, doctor, does it mean that we have to specify the kind of animals, like the kind of meat, to take into our bodies? Because we can't live without these animals. We are dependent on them. So on this COVID-19 issue, does it mean that the WHO should come out with specific animals that we should eat daily?
Well, what it is that there are certain animals which harbor these viruses. And for as long as these viruses are contained in those animals, they may not affect us. Now, these are wild animals. The reservoirs that I'm talking about are wild animals, and they are in the wild. The domesticated animals are actually managed, and we have what we call biosecurity measures. Biosecurity simply means biological security measures. What are these biological security measures? These are animal health, operations that we carry out to ensure that the animals that we have domesticated are free from diseases that could actually affect human beings. So the animals that are domesticated are managed in such a way that they should actually be protected against these viruses. So we protect them by managing them and ensuring that we implement certain biosecurity measures. So, for example, we need to ensure that we monitor the health of the animals, and if at all we detect any problem, then these animals must be they could be quarantined, they could be treated, or they could be put down depending on the nature of the diseases that we are dealing with. So, for example, if you have a virus that causes mad cow disease, it's a viral infection. So if you have an animal contracting that kind of disease, of course, we know that you cannot treat a viral infection. Viruses are cannot be treated using medicine. So in that case, what normally happens is that you can put the animals down. So that is where you see that you hear the government declaring that we have an outbreak of mad cow disease. Therefore, all animals that are detected or diagnosed with mad cow disease must be slaughtered. So in short, what I should say is domesticated animals are normally controlled so that they do not carry diseases which are caused by these viruses. On the other hand, there are animals in the world, and even within the world, within the forest, not all animals carry these viruses that we are referring to. There are certain species, certain animal species that carry these viruses, and therefore we always want to ensure that those animals are not actually brought in contact with human beings. So the World Health Organization has already provided guidelines in terms of how we manage these animals and how we control them to ensure that we do not allow for the spread of diseases from these wild animals to human beings.
Doctor, so based on your educational background and observation, do you think that wearing of masks and other precautions are enough to limit this virus issue?
Well, of course, what we are trying to do here is to protect ourselves from contracting this virus. The virus is already there. And I think in terms of the control measures, they have to go beyond the masks and the masks or the personal protective equipment that we need. We need a comprehensive package of measures. So, for example, we need to ensure that we develop policies that limit forest degradation or forest deforestation. We need policies that ensure that, for example, we control the movement of animals or movement of wildlife. We need to ensure that there are measures that guide, for example, captive breeding. And so it has to be a package of several measures. Protective clothing by itself cannot control COVID-19. Those, I think, are contingency measures that we have taken. But in terms of the long-term progress, we need to embrace several other measures.
This is very sad. This is really sad. So, doctor, can we predict that we can get extreme virus issue more than COVID-19 in the future? Can we predict that?
Of course, what normally happens is that scientists will normally use some models to try and predict some of these pandemics. But of course, what we need to understand is that nature is very complex. And what we know about nature is very little, unfortunately. No matter how much research we have conducted, there are so many microbes that we have not fully understood. Just as COVID-19 up to now, if the virus causing COVID-19 up to now is not fully understood. Researchers are working frantically to try and understand the virus. So yes, we can predict some of the epidemics or pandemics to some extent, but most of the information we need in order to manage these microbes is still yet to be developed.
Oh, God should help us through. Hello, Angie.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, doctor, have said a lot, so we need your opinion on the other side also. Well, you are in the educational sector, so I'm going to bother you on the educational industry or sector. Based on your observation, what are the differences between this COVID circumstances and the previous, based on your observation, Angie? Has there been any difference, any similarities, any declination, or we want to learn from you because you are into the educational sector, so you are the best person to give us the observation, the realistic issues at the moment?
Sure. So I'm an English teacher at a charter school in the state of Massachusetts in the US. And since March, we had to make the drastic shift to go remote because I'm in an area that's been highly impacted by COVID. And, you know, from March to June, the end of last school year, it was a really hard shift. We were trying to get Chromebooks out to students, and we just really weren't prepared for it. We did the best that we could, but I'd say that what we've learned from that time in the spring versus how we're rolling out this upcoming school year, which is also remote, is completely different. And our administrators are doing everything to make sure that internet is accessible to students, that Chromebooks are provided. We have a different approach with students logging onto the Zoom actually for live classes the entire day and teachers hopping on at different times. So I'd say that from the spring until now, the approach has been very different, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes starting on Tuesday with the kids.
That's very bad. So, Angie, I've been following a lot of issues in America. Now, I would say that you also witness it, that America has been the stagnant of this pandemic issue at the moment. Just 2 days ago, you were fighting on your education sector because people are arguing that it's not yet time for you to accept students physically, like face-to-face education. What do you think about that? Do you agree to that, or do you think that we can do more to get back our students?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that it's really complicated, and what's happening right now is that you see local communities making decisions about what to do, what's best for their community, just because the numbers vary so much. So, for example, Massachusetts in general has really been able to bring down the amount of COVID cases. as a whole. And some areas are able to go back to like a hybrid model where the students maybe go in 2 days during the week and are remote, and then the other group of students in the class go back 2 other days. And I think that in general, that's where the direction that schools want to go into. But there are some areas that are still in the red zone, like where I teach, where it's just not yet safe to return. I know that I've seen different groups of teachers that have been going on strike, kind of like you've mentioned, or protesting about that it's not safe to return. It's hard. I don't think that there's any simple answer. And I think that it's not ideal for anybody, right? It's hard for the families. It's hard for the students. It's hard for the teachers. And everybody right now is just really trying to make the most of it, and most importantly, be safe, because, you know, when you're in a community that is densely populated, you don't want to continue the spread where it's already active.
Mm. So, Angie, have you had any conversation with your students? How are they coping in this pandemic issue? Have you ever had any conversation? Personally, have you had any personal interaction with your students?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think in the spring, because everything happened so quickly, that we didn't have students coming on the Zooms every day. Sometimes they would come on and I would check in with them there. But this year, I've been having some check-ins with them individually before we start on Tuesday. And, you know, I think that there's a lot on their mind, and some of it might be COVID. Some of it might be that they're tired of being at home and want to be back at school and see their friends. And I think that there's just also a lot of civil unrest in the country right now. So they have a lot on their mind with that too. And they're at home on top of it. And, you know, my school right now is really describing it as a dual virus here in the United States of COVID and racism, because I think that COVID has really shown that certain communities of color in the U.S. have been disproportionately affected. And there's a lot on my students' minds right now that I'm best trying to be able to address.
Mm. So, Angie, do you have this personal compassion for the students? And do you think that we should continue with online teaching, or we should opt to face-to-face teaching? You are a teacher. So what is your experience on this? Do you think the world should opt for online studies, or we should still fight for the face-to-face studies?
Good question. I think that, I mean, speaking from the particular community that I serve, I definitely think that we should still be online right now. It's like I said, they're in the red zone. There are still many new cases coming out every day. And since a lot of my students live with maybe grandparents or aunts and uncles too, in addition to their parents, there are people who are just more at risk that if the kids get it, they're going to be able to pass it on. And you know, it's really hard in a classroom to be able to meet some of the guidelines of the CDC to really have students be safe. You know, not all classrooms are that big to be able to social distance to the exact amount that they might be recommending. And, you know, especially with the younger kids, it's really hard to enforce certain things. I do know some of the younger kids that are going back. It's not mandated that the masks have to be worn for kindergartners just because they're too young. And like I said, I don't think that the numbers are as high as among them are affected, but some of them might have weaker immune systems or be able to be carriers. So for my community, that's best. But I think that for a lot of communities that aren't as affected or that are in more rural parts of America, if they make the decision to go back because the numbers there are so incredibly low and they've had like weeks at a time of no new cases, it makes sense to go back at like a level where you're just safe and you have all those precautions in place. But I think it's really based on the community and what's happening there.
Yeah. So, Andrew, on this note, do you think that the government, your government, Donald Trump and the ministers, together with WHO, are not doing the best to help you? Because COVID-19 has been in existence more than 2 months now. So, if they had done a great job for you, you wouldn't have faced issues like these. Do you think that these people are not helping the educational sector? Because we know that without education, we cannot proceed in life. And here is the case, they are not focusing on the education sector, and we are causing harm to the future leaders of our world, because these kids and the people are going to rule the nation. So do you think, based on your observation, Donald Trump government and WHO are not doing much to help teachers and the other people in the educational sectors?
Good question. I think I have a couple of things that I want to say about that. One is that in the U.S., from my perspective, the reaction was really slow. I think that people had a really hard time understanding what was happening back in March, and I'm sure that could be true in a lot of other countries in the world. But I feel like people in different industries were realizing that they needed to be home at different times. So it was like a really slow stagger for people to like realize what was going on, take it seriously, and be home during some of the biggest peaks of COVID. And with that being said, I think that the federal government has been putting a lot of pressure in the U.S. for schools to open up, and some have, and they've closed back down, actually. There are stories within Florida and other states that opened prematurely and saw spikes. And so I think that we need support in a way that gives more power to states or to local communities to really make the best decisions. And I think that we need to be giving options to our families right now. Like you said, like parents need to be able to go to work, right? Their life needs to be able to continue on, but everybody has such different situations where parents might want their kids to still be staying home for various reasons, what works best for their family. So I think that being flexible and giving power to the local communities and supporting them in that, not discrediting them, and making sure that there are options for families is what's most important right now.
Angie, from what you have been telling us, this shows that you are really sorry for what this pandemic crisis have done to the world. Can I say that in other ways also lessen your burden as a teacher? Because if it wasn't COVID-19, you would have been preparing towards classes, thinking about what to teach your students. Don't you think that other people are rejoicing because they've not got a lot to do in the sector? Do you think that
people are
teachers,
how people are viewing teachers right now, you mean?
Yeah, like you are complaining, but can we say that other people are also happy of this COVID-19?
I think that, everybody is in such different situations right now based on their work, based on their families, based on the need to protect their families, based on the health histories of them. That yes, absolutely. Everybody has different views here. There's some teachers that are like, I want to go back into the classroom. Like, why are there teachers who are protesting? And then there are teachers who are just saying, it's way too soon. I don't want to go back. I don't want to expose my own personal family by going in and seeing my students, like a large group of people in a small room, even if it's only 13 people. There are a lot of corporate jobs that aren't doing that right now in the US that are able to figure out other options. So I think that it's one of those things where it's hard and you're not going to make everybody happy.
All right. Andrew, your last question before we go to Doctor. Andrew, do you think that your council, your educational council in your community are not fighting for your right at the moment?
I don't think that we're being represented as much as we could be. Especially for me, at a charter school, you're not unionized, and even the unions right now, I'm sure, are struggling to figure out the best ways to represent their public school teachers. For everybody to feel safe, and not only that, but have their time protected, because a lot is being asked of teachers right now.
All right, Angie, thank you so much for your time. We will come back to you right after Doctor's opinion. Doctor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Doctor.
Hello.
Yeah, Doctor, thank you so much for waiting for us. Dr. Angie has said a lot in the educational sector. Is there any relationship between the environment and the education?
There is a very strong relationship in terms of environmental management. When you look at environmental management, it has a number of areas. first we have to look at education. The people who work in the environmental sector are basically people who are trained, people who have gone through different educational systems. So what COVID has done is that it has interfered with the smooth progress of education. So we have education, we have, for example, university research institution labs which are closed, and they cannot assist in terms of educating the masses and even educating the students in terms of what is happening. So we have issues with education. What we are also experiencing is the fact that, for example, we have postdoc students or researchers who depend on these educational institutions in order for them to conduct research that contributes to environmental management. So these are also affected, and they cannot function at the rate they are meant to. And I also have to mention the fact that when we are implementing a number of environmental programs, we also have an educational component. So, for example, if you are looking at conservation of a forest, conservation of biodiversity in a forest, what we normally do is, apart from just implementing activities to do with protection of the forest, we also teach the local communities in terms of how they should contribute to the conservation of these forests or other land-based ecosystems or even marines. So education is key in terms of implementation of environmental programs.
So, Doctor, please, do you think that due to this pandemic issue, future researchers are not going to have the gas to enter into this field? Because they might think that even what is the essence of research? Because for more than 2 months now, which we've encountered COVID-19 in the world, there's nothing been done to solve this issue. So what is the essence of being a researcher? Do you think that this issue can be possible at the moment, Doctor?
Well, what I would say is that whenever you are faced with a situation or you are faced with a crisis, I think one of the things we want to do is to try and understand what has caused that crisis. So when you look at research, in fact, the more complicated the issues become, the higher the demand for research. So, of course, there are certain research activities that have not been undertaken because of COVID-19, and some of them may never be undertaken because there are issues with, for example, funding. Some of the activities which were funded by certain institutions can no longer proceed because some of those institutions which were funding that kind of research have actually run into financial problems. So we have part of research that may not continue. But in terms of looking forward, I think it has to be a key policy issue to ensure that there is adequate funding for education, that there is adequate funding for research, because the only way we can manage our environment is by understanding how the environment functions. So it has ecosystem processes, and we need to understand those processes. We also need to understand how the changing environment is affecting the way that those processes proceed. So we cannot do away with research. If anything, we need more investment in research.
Doctor, please, based on what you've explained so far, do you think that religion can also be part of environment?
Religion, in fact, you've asked a very interesting question. It is one area that I work in, and I have a strong desire to see that area developed. The environment is a term that we normally use generally, but in actual fact, when you go to the Bible, the environment is what we call God's creation. And the primary function of humanity is stewardship. And that stewardship entails looking after the environment, which we call creation. In fact, the very first chapter of the Bible, it's actually Genesis 1:26, actually says, God said, let us make man in our own image, that he may rule over the fishes of the seas, the birds of the air, the livestock, the wildlife that creeps on the surface of the earth, and the entire earth. So the Bible actually says the primary function of humanity is to actually steward his creation. So there is a very strong link. In fact, what I can actually say, or what I should confidently say is the fact that part of the problem is actually because the church has not functioned the way it's meant to. Because if the church had taken up this task, understanding that taking care of God's creation is the primary function, then some of the issues that we are dealing with right now wouldn't have been there. You know, let me also mention this. Initially, earlier on, I said that one of the reasons why we are encountering some of these diseases is because we are destroying the forest. And one of the things that is very key is the fact that some of these forests are actually destroyed to the extent we are experiencing because of greed. We know very well that we are not meant to do certain things, and yet we go ahead doing them. And what I can say is this: whenever you do something that you know that is wrong, biblically it's sin. So we can actually say a large portion of what we are experiencing right now comes down to the fact that we have not actually done our job as environmental stewards.
So, Doctor, do you think that religion can impede the precautions of COVID-19?
Yes, religion can. Religion has multiple functions. First and foremost, religion has, in fact, I'll use, rather than use the broader term religion, let me use the example of Christianity. So Christianity has a very big role. In fact, if you look at the history of the church, one thing you realize is that there have been debates, even within the environmental sector, that the ecological crisis that we have experienced over time is because the church has actually misinterpreted the Bible. So, for example, people have said when the Bible says have dominion over creation, some people have interpreted that verse to mean that we can use the environment the way we want. And in so doing, we have actually exploited the environment beyond the limit. So as Christians, if we can take up our role to look at the environment as God's creation and to ensure that we are able to look after God's environment, then some of the issues, could actually be dealt with. Let's not forget, the Bible actually says we are created in God's image. So in other words, what it actually means is that we should be looking at the environment, God's creation, the way God himself looks at it. And therefore, we should be taking care of that environment the way God himself would want us to take care of it. So as Christians, we have a big role in terms of, first of all, practicing what we have been taught, and secondly, providing leadership in terms of caring for creation. Let me just give you an example. There was a time when I was leading a project in Papua New Guinea, and we realized that actually people did not believe in the government. The government was guiding them in terms of how they needed to look after the environment, but people were very resistant to the message that was coming from the government. But what we realized as an organization was the fact that people respected men and women of God much more than people in the government. So what we did was to develop educational programs which actually targeted the church. And one thing we realized was that because the pastors or the men and women of God were actually instructing people to look after the environment, a lot of people in the community looked after the environment a lot better than even those who were being instructed by the government foresters or other environmental managers. So we have come to realize that if the church came out and had a strong voice and they did their part, they would actually make a very big contribution in terms of how to manage the environment.
So, Doctor, based on this, because personally, I think religion is really causing this COVID-19 issue to rise up, because people, as you just said, and I really love it, people respect religion so much than environmental leaders, especially in the various countries. Hi, Solomon. Nice
Hi.
to have you at the moment. Yeah.
Likewise.
So, Doctor, do you think that WHO should organize seminars and work together with religious organizations more than researchers? Do you think that?
Yes, I think what we need to understand is that the only way we will tackle this COVID-19 and other subsequent pandemics is to develop a comprehensive program. You know, what we've been doing is dealing with the COVID-19 in piecemeals. But what we need is a comprehensive program that incorporates different sectors, and the church or the religion should be a key factor in doing that. And what we are saying here is not something new, because the environmental sector has actually realized that they cannot deal with the environment just based on research and education. So after realizing that faith is key in terms of looking after the environment. For example, the International Union for Conservation of Nature has established a religious department within the organization. The United Nations recognizes faith-based organizations as environmental managers. So the world already recognizes the role of religion in terms of looking after the environment. But what we have not done as a church is to step up our activities to occupy that position that we have been given within this international community.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. Hello, Solomon.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, please, I can.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us at this time. Solomon, we've said a lot. Doctor was focusing on environmental issues. Angela was focusing on educational issues. So to you, I'm going to focus on company issues, because you are CEO of a company and you are into that sector at the moment, because environment, according to Doctor, comprises a lot, which we can talk about within our time. So, Solomon, as the CEO, what are your observations in this COVID-19 era and the previous era? What have you learned? Personally, what have you learned?
Okay. First of all, I think can everybody hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So first of all, I think I like the part where you said that the era before and then the era after COVID-19, because the year that we know before now is ultimately different from that we know before is ultimately different from the one that we all know now. Business-wise, the religions-wise, academic-wise, all of that. So like the world has drastically changed from what we used to know and from what it is at this point. And most people, I would say, when it comes to campaigning, they've actually been, I would say, focusing on the negative part of the whole COVID-19. I don't want to talk much about religion, but the fact is that being alive at this point is actually a gift. Because before, if you had met me, I don't know if you met me like maybe last year, you told me that something is going to happen and the whole world, I'm not saying like America alone or UK alone or Nigeria alone, the whole world is going to lock down and nothing is going to run. I'd say that you're crazy. But it did happen. It did happen. Like the whole world was in lockdown for more than a month.
Yeah.
So that's to tell you that there is definitely God. I mean, like, it's impossible for you to say that there's nothing called a God, because by the virtue of this happening means that anything is possible. So there's no country or no humans that say that they are formidable, or they say that they are actually know-it-all, or they are that, like this big that nothing can actually affect them. So with all this being said, I just want to also like take this opportunity to appreciate the fact that we witnessed something like this at our time. Talking about COVID-19 and companies, there's no company that literally didn't get affected by this whole COVID-19 thing. I mean, like literally all company, like not even just company, every human is touched, regardless of what you do, regardless of what you who you are. You definitely had felt the impact. Personally, my company, I started my company last year, and you're not going to believe that I lost a business deal of about $4 million US in the space of 2 months. That was just between April and May, due to COVID-19. And when I bring an analysis to come and help me at the rate that my company is growing, that kind of money, there's no way I could actually gain it back in the next 5 years without mercy and a lot of grace. So everyone, even PwC, I'm pretty sure maybe people will be familiar with PwC. I have friends there that at this point they've lost their job due to COVID-19. And lots of people are laying off their staff. Why? Because they have commitment which they cannot uphold at this point because of the heat that everyone is taking. So the world that we know before is definitely going to be different from the one that is going to be happening now. Industries, church, or I would say religious organizations, all of us are literally affected by this whole COVID-19 thing. And I think at this point, the great researchers don't even know what we can actually do to actually resuscitate the world back to the way it was. Even people with great minds and everything actually don't really know what we are supposed to do. Everyone at this point is just thinking that as a company, what am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do to still stay in business and not run out of business? And what are we supposed to do and still try to maintain the integrity and the quality of our services to people? For my own, if I would say from my company's perspective, we didn't lay off any staff by the grace of God, but at the same time, we know that things are not easy. We are not making money. Why? Because the business that used to be self-sufficient at this point, we are not making any money as a company, because most of the money that we are actually making now, we are putting it back into the business, into paying salaries, getting inventory. So all the business that used to be self-sufficient, that we even had extra posts that we are using to give into charity, because my company has a charity arm that we used to buy foods for people in motherless baby home. All of those projects at this point, they've stopped. So what we are doing now is ultimately just trying to remain in business. So all the things that we are doing before that is making the company look good, all those charity that we are giving into, all those marketing that we know that it might probably work or not work, that we are putting money into before, we are not doing all those ones anymore. The things that we are investing in now are the things that we know that they are bringing us results and they're bringing us business and jobs. Those are the only things that we are involving ourselves into at this point. We are not happy doing that, but if we still want to continue in business, things have to change. So I would say my company is affected. Lots and lots of companies I know, they are definitely affected. And
this is very sad. Yeah, it's very sad.
Actually, it is.
Yeah, it's actually sad. Yeah, Solomon, before you join us, Dr. Martin was giving us analysis of what the environment is, and specifically he brought up that WHO is not doing enough to help limit this crisis. Do you think, or do you agree to what Dr. said, that WHO is not doing much to help the world? Because we can do more than wearing of masks and other these precautions we are doing at the moment to sustain life and to sustain our businesses. Do you agree to what Dr. said to us earlier?
I agree with 100%. And I do think that WHO is part of the reason why we are in this problem that we are today.
Are you serious?
No, why I said that? I said, no, this is national TV, and we should be cautious what we say. But at the same point, I think to some extent, it is their fault that we actually in this point that we are. WHO waited over a month before they declared this thing as a pandemic. They know that this thing had the potential of actually affecting lots of people, but the WHO waited until lots and lots of countries have actually been affected before they now declare this thing as a pandemic. I don't know, if you go to my LinkedIn, you will definitely see an article that I wrote about WHO, knowing that this thing has a potential of actually affecting lots of worlds, but they kept quiet at some point. At that point, they didn't mention that it was actually a pandemic. So before they actually announced that it was pandemic, then this thing has actually really spread into lots and lots of countries. So it now makes this the spread more faster, and the whole lockdown thing now came from the spread. But had they been, they were fast enough to actually announce that this was actually a pandemic, and all the countries should take guards and take precautions, maybe it wouldn't have spread up to this point. So definitely they are one of their problems. So since I realized this thing, I barely follow anything that they say anymore. Why? Because I think the problem that we are in today, to some extent, they have some credit to take for it. So yeah, I do agree with the doctor here. I definitely do.
So
and I feel
all right. On this note, do you think that we need not to trust the WHO as we did? Because previously people had a lot of
faith in
trust in them. So do you think that this pandemic has given us a realization that no, we can do more than what these WHO organizations have done for the world previously? Do you think that?
I wouldn't say WHO is incapable, but I would say that politics were in place. That's for sure. Politics were in place. So instead of thinking about humanity and thinking about how to better the humanity and the things that we actually do to like help one another, they were rather thinking about which country is affected and which one is what. So it's like, and some points when I think Madagascar said that they got some sort of cure, WHO completely threw away what they were saying. So I'm not going to say, because lots of people, we have lots of faith in them, and me, I'm just one person that I don't know a lot of things, but I would say WHO are not to be trusted. I mean, like, they are not to be trusted with what the role that they play in the position that the world is at this point. I think that they have a lot to do. And all these things that they did come from the fact that we trusted them.
Yeah.
It came from the trust that we had, and it came not just the trust and the faith that we had in them is part of the problem that we are. So to some extent, I think that we have to look after one another, maybe more than we are putting our faith into some organization that they're actually very political, and they listen to money, and they listen to some particular people, and they favor some particular people for some whatever reason that they have. So I would say they are not to be 100% trusted. So I believe that we have personal work to do for ourselves than listen to them sometimes.
All right. So on this note, do you think that WHO are ignoring Americans? Because Angela is in America, and we all know that there are a lot of issues going on, even at now. So do you think that WHO do not care about Americans at the moment?
When you say care, I wouldn't put it that way, because maybe it's not their job to actually care, but their job is just to like carry out what they do. So America actually seems to be like the most country that took on most of this COVID-19 thing. I mean, the cases in America was close to about 3 million. Angela, I don't know if that's accurate, but the statistic that we have here, that they had close to about, I think about 3 million cases, and had about 70,000 to like 90,000 deaths. Though they have some recovery. If they say about 90,000 people have died, then I don't know what exactly what WHO were doing. So when you want to put it in the way of saying that care, I don't know if they actually care or they don't. But I think to some extent, America seems to be one of the greatest countries that is actually giving to WHO the most. I mean, I would know Mr. Bill Gates is part of those people that donates to WHO the most. Like when you say that most of the people that fund them the most, that they give them all the capital that they use for all this funding and everything. And so they wouldn't say that they neglected them, but there are some things that come to play that I don't have answers to. that we don't have access to. But I know there's more to what we are hearing. There are more to what we can read, and there's more to everything that is happening, more than what they are bringing to show us as a public. So
Yeah,
so
my reason of using the word care is that just recently, I don't know whether you also heard this news, a medical expertise came out with a proof that she has
I saw the
solution to
video.
COVID. Yes,
Yeah, I saw the
and
video.
that person is in America. By after that incident, we've not heard anything about WHO on this issue. So I can definitely say that WHO are ignoring Americans on this note, because you've not done a lot for the world, and here's the case: somebody has done a research and has a proof and has come to the world to say, this is my proof, show to this world and let's know. And yesterday we've not come out to say anything. Can't we say that these people are rather looking down upon Americans and they are rather interested in what is happening to the world?
Can I say something?
Okay.
Can I just say something?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, of course, yeah. America, I mean, the United States of America is one of the countries that has suffered most in terms of
absolutely.
Death. And I think I was watching the news. I think they have crossed 185,000
deaths.
Yeah. Now, I think we need to differentiate between science and politics. One thing I know is that, of course, the United States of America is considering withholding funding to the World Health Organization.
Yes.
I think there are two issues here. There is a political angle where the United States of America thinks that the World Health Organization didn't do its job very well in the way it handled the pandemic in China. So that is one aspect. And the other thing is, because of the way the issue has been handled, there is also, a notion that we can actually, America can actually do away with the World Health Organization. I think the truth of the matter is, in terms of science, I think the United States of America has the capacity to develop the prophylactic drugs, the prophylactic drugs, the vaccines and drugs, and curative drugs and so forth. But referring to the case that you mentioned, Benedicta, a doctor came out and said she had proof that the drug she was promoting could actually contribute to mitigating the problem of the pandemic. I think the problem that was there was that the drug that person was promoting had not gone through the proper screening procedures to be cleared by the system so that it could be used broadly. Because within the health system or within the scientific arena, there is a certain procedure of introducing a drug. So you do not introduce a drug until it has gone through certain phases of testing. So you screen the drug, and it must reach a certain threshold before you decide to say, we can now roll it out, and it can be used by everyone else. So that doctor did whatever they did them on their own, but there was no peer review. Normally in science, before you actually implement anything, or before it is widely accepted within the scientific community, it has to be peer reviewed. So that component of peer reviewing the drug was not accommodated. And the question they kept asking was, where is the evidence? How has it been tested? Because you must test it for a certain period and using a certain number of human beings before you actually use that, roll a drug, widely. So she didn't provide that evidence that the drug had been tested and it had met the requirements. So that was a separate issue.
Okay. So, Doctor, you are expert in that field. I am not, and I'm sure Solomon and Angie are also in the same issue with me. So,
okay.
How do we know that these are what are needed for somebody to be done? Because seriously, when this video came up, a lot of people, especially myself, I spoke against WHO because I never knew that these are the requirements needed for the woman to go through. But I was focusing on what the woman was saying due to this hectic issues at the moment. So, doctor, don't you think that WHO has to come out and also explain things to the world, that these are what we are requiring for people to before we can accept issues on board? Don't you think that they have to also do this experiment and education to the world, because most of us are ignorant on what you just said?
Thank you. So the World Health Organization has been constituted by member countries, which is the global community. So they have scientists who actually develop protocols. They provide guidelines to countries. That's their responsibility. They deal with every country. So they have to ensure that the different countries are adhering to the guidelines they provide. So first and foremost, I would say that the World Health Organization has provided guidelines in terms of how a drug should be tested before it can be used by the communities. And secondly, what I would also want to say is that the United States of America has the capacity to provide that leadership in terms of rolling out those protocols, because the CDC in the United States of America actually has been assisting several other countries to implement these guidelines. So it's not a question of the capacity, not a question of not knowing what needs to be done, but within the internal clearing mechanism within the United States of America, this individual, this group, whether it was, this group of doctors, they did not adopt that national clearing systems in terms of clearing the drug. So whenever, the United States of America has a way of accepting drugs. So before a drug can be used within the United States of America, the FDA has to clear that drug. It was not cleared by the FDA. The CDC was not involved in actually clearing that drug. So it just came on the scene, and then that was announced. And what I should also say is that we need to be very careful as we go through this pandemic, because what is happening now is that the political system is actually trying to force the science to skip certain steps in terms of screening the drugs. So because people are just looking at the number of deaths, what is happening is we are casting a blind eye on the protocols and the procedures. And there is a possibility we may accept certain drugs which have side effects that may not be seen right now, but they will come in a little later. So what I would, in conclusion, what I would say is that the United States of America has protocols. The World Health Organization has protocols for all countries. And these two, I would say they have the capacity to deal with issues that are arising in nations.
Angela, we have to hear from you at the moment, because we are talking about your country. Meanwhile, you are also with us at the moment. Angela, personally, what do you feel for your country about the human resources you've lost, about the chaotic wars going on? Because just this morning I was watching NBC News, and it was very bad, killing people, protesting, a lot of issues. So what do you think that your country is facing at the moment? And what is your suggestion to your government at the moment?
I mean, the United States is a really complicated country, I'd say. And, it's kind of what was mentioned earlier, that it's like there's science, but there's also this political side of the United States. And I think that what I'd mentioned earlier is COVID really shed a light on communities that were being disproportionately affected here. And then in addition to that, other political unrest. And I think that it's just really showing the amount of systemic change that needs to happen in the US. And I think too, like with the spread of COVID, how you talk about the word care, like I think different people think caring for different people looks like different things, and because we're so individualistic and collectivistic, it can be really hard to understand each other, and the culture is going to make it more challenging to overcome a lot of the issues that we have, I think.
All right, Angela, both of our great men at the moment, Dr. Martin and King Solomon, made mention of politics. Do you think that this ideology is true and rampant at the moment? Basically, do you think that this is what is preventing Americans from succeeding in this pandemic crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything in the United States is politicized. So yes, it's also just it's just really challenging, I think. It's challenging for people to listen from one another, and even like geographically within the United States, there are big differences as well. And, I think Solomon mentioned this earlier, but for the small business owners in the United States, it's very much like, I want to be working, I want to be able to make money, I want to be able to support my family. And yet, because our culture is so individualistic, things are also just like spreading rampantly with COVID. So it's just making it really complicated. And I don't think I have any specific answers, but there's a lot that we need to work on.
I know there is a lot. Angie, I know definitely America is part of the countries which initiated freedom of justice on all this, right? So does it mean that you personally, I mean, saying you means Americans, upon you bringing up these laws and rules to the entire world, which other countries have been following, you are ignoring yourself at the moment? Do you think we can subject to this ideology?
Like the ideology of like following what we're doing in the United States.
Yeah, the ideology of freedom of justice, political freedom.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, politics is about individualistic freedom. Yes, and you've organized a lot of issues on freedom and justice, which other world or other countries have followed up to date.
Right.
So
I see.
in this crisis, can I say personally, because I'm a political student again, can I say personally that you are ignoring your own right and you are not upgrading yourself on what you just said to the world some years ago?
I mean, I do think that there are a lot of countries that are like looking to America right now as in terms of like what comes next from a political standpoint. I think that in a lot of ways our individualism is harming us, and I don't know if I have any specific answers really, to be completely honest. I think that time will tell as we get closer to the elections as well what happens and next steps within the United States. I think that there are just so many factors happening right now politically and with COVID that I hope that we rise to finding what justice looks like, so then other countries can follow our suit and we will see what happens. There are a lot of people that want to be listened to right now.
Yeah, definitely. That's the reason why we are embarking on this project, that we have to protect and prevent the world against future pandemic crisis. And throughout, we'll be thinking and bringing WHO on board at this time, that this is what they must do, and this is what. Doctor, please, back to you. We've based on our discussion so far, I have realized that religion and politics are really impeding on environmental issues. Is that true on your educational observation and knowledge?
Yes, I think you've dealt with two issues. You have mentioned two things: politics and religion. Yes, both politics and religion have actually affected the way the COVID pandemic has panned out. As I said earlier on, I think it is important that for example, the faithfuls, or let me say the Christians, and all those that are part of this religious sector take up their position. As I said earlier on, it has been said that actually Christians have been behind the environmental crisis because they have actually, instead of taking up that role to actually care for the environment, they actually promoted an ideology that resulted in the ecological crisis. And of course, there has been before COVID-19. Of course, there were observations that the church is beginning to realize that it has to take up its position in terms of caring for the environment. So, as I said earlier on, now the United Nations and other environmental organizations have recognized the church as a key stakeholder in environmental management. On the other hand, again, the politics are at play. If at all we have to, the governments of the day have to provide that leadership. The policies and the regulations that they develop must be seen to support what we are doing in terms of environmental management. Of course, the political powers that tussle may easily take us off the problem. For example, the issue that the United States of America and China have been batting around. It has affected the way we have handled COVID-19. As I said earlier on, the United States of America all along has been seen to provide leadership. But because of those internal political issues, as well as the tussles with other nations, we have more or less taken the eye off the ball, and we have not really handled the COVID-19 the way it should.
This is very
agree.
Yeah. Angie, what is your opinion on what Dr. just said?
I agree.
It's true.
So, yeah, Solomon, I think you want to tell us something.
Oh no, because they all underestimated the virus, and it was part of the reason why the WHO did wrong, because they know the potentials of this virus, they knew what it could do. Yet they kept quiet and they didn't announce in time there was pandemic, and they let China spread it to all over the world. And the worst part was, after all this is done, they were able to overcome and they were able to fight the virus in their own way. So we now started suffering the spread and the lethal part of the virus. Why the things have gone back to normal or things the way they used to be in their country? It's not fair. It's not fair at all. Was it?
Yeah, this reminds me. So does it mean that Solomon? Does it mean that the WHO should rather collaborate with the Chinese people in order to find ways to solve issues in the world, especially in the America?
I don't think WHO should collaborate with anyone. I think they should just do their job. Because you cannot put us in a problem, then you still go back to those same people and trying to say that you want to save us. Why in this mess in the first place? Because I am not a doctor. I don't have I'm just a biochemist, and I run a company. I'm not even doing anything in the lab anymore. And I could instantly tell that this virus, the end is going to be lethal. Just like I said, before they announced there was pandemic, I wrote an article to say that WHO knew that this was actually going to be a pandemic. And up till now, they've not announced yet. What research have I done? But just looking at it strategically, the way the thing is spreading and how fast it's spreading, and even the means at which it's spreading, you can instantly tell that this can be a problem. So there's no way, with all the researches that they've made, and they will tell me that they didn't know that thing was going to be a pandemic. And they waited that long before they announced it. If I was the DG for the WHO, immediately China released this virus, we shot our plane. Our plane is no longer fighting there. No, it's not it's not because I'm not saying that we should discriminate. No. But the thing is, if you are going to bring something that is going to kill my country to me, then don't bring it at all. Just take care of it when you're done. No, because when we are all affected, then we can help you. But if you are affected and you stop it there, then we can supply all the support that we can give. But when we are fighting, and I'm fighting, there's no way I can help you fight, because I have to fight for myself. But when you have the problem and it remains there, then whatever research that we can make, all of the things that we can do, that we offer the report. WHO could have done something like this, but they didn't do it. They waited for China. So when the thing was spread and it became the world's problem, then we have to lock down the entire world. Then they now declare a pandemic. So lots of politics happens, honestly, like it really did. I wish I could say a lot of things here, but then, you know, it's national TV. I don't want to like draw unnecessary attention. So that's why I can say certain things. But but lots and lots of things happens more than what we can talk about here. Honestly, lots have happened.
It's just
especially
very sad.
I didn't know that there was this point where they also talk about vaccination, and
that would be a different issue altogether.
So like I'm trying to say that a lot of things has happened that we can not really talk about, but then there are people that knows what's going on. There are people that knows this is going to happen. There are people that knows that all this is happening, that they are aware from the beginning. I promise. There are people that know all of those things. Honestly, it's true. It's very true.
You're so funny, Solomon. Okay, so Solomon, as we are running up, what is your advice to the world on this issue?
My advice to the world is that we shouldn't see the world the way we used to say it. We should ultimately see the world as a new place entirely. And I want you to know, as human, and as you're hearing this, I mean, lots of people lost their life. In America, about over 6 million cases. Over 6 million. Can you believe that? Over 6 million cases. And even China that brought the disease, they didn't even have up to 1 million. America's population is about 250 million. And 6 million of those people have gone through the case. And they've had about 190,000 deaths. So for us to be alive at this point, I believe that there is a purpose. So if we didn't lose our life in this pandemic, I know that God has a plan for our lives. We ultimately survive all of these problems because of the purpose that we have to serve. And I just want us to keep on fighting. I want us to keep on keeping on. And I can assure us that individually, we will all definitely get to the goal, because it's fundamentally important for us as a person. If you agree with me that the reason why we are still alive at this point is because of our purpose in life, then I think we should keep on trying, we should keep on fighting. And I can assure us that at the end of the day, we're all going to give testimony. And at the end of the day, we're all going to tell the story, to our children, to our children's children, that at this point that we live to witness something or like this, something like this, that we live to witness it and we survived it. And, this is the story. So that's just my advice.
No, definitely, this is a story and this is a history at the moment, which we will never forget. Nobody will forget about it. Thank you so much, Solomon, for joining us. We hope to get you again on the vaccine issue. Thank you. Hi, Doctor. Please. Hi. Yeah, we need much ideas and knowledge from you on this issue as we are running up. What are your requests and ideas for the world?
First and foremost, we need to look at the new world in a slightly different way. We need to ensure that we implement reforms that strengthen sustainable development. And when I say sustainable development, I'm looking at different sectors of development, because there is a temptation that we may focus on the economy, because everyone is now talking about the economy and health. But going forward, if we have to avert future crises, we need to ensure that we come up with a comprehensive package that also looks at other sectors that have not been prominent in dealing with this issue. And I also emphasize the fact that if we have to reduce the incidence of zoonoses or viruses or microbes that jump from wild animals to human beings, then biosecurity must be strong. And finally, it is important that we involve religious groups, because we know that God is able to sustain us and to help us deal with any plague. Thank you.
All right. So, Doctor, does it mean that we need to focus on object of worship more than the environmental precautions?
Well, in fact, if you look at the Bible, or you look at the faith, there are two aspects which need to be taken on together. First and foremost, we study the Bible to know God and to practice the way of living that He recommends for us, or to obey His commandments. Secondly, the Bible itself actually says that God reveals His power. He also reveals His character through nature. So the nature that we see is not just an ordinary nature. God Himself reveals, God reveals Himself through this nature, and He has given us the responsibility to look after nature. So in summary, when you are a Christian, you actually depend on the book of scriptures, which is the Bible. You also depend on the book of God's works, which is nature.
Which is nature. So that means that we should combine both.
You can never be a complete Christian unless you study the book of nature and the book of scriptures.
Okay. So, Doctor, what about those who are not Christians?
Well, you see, that the thing is, that is where we have issues, because if you are not a Christian, then you do not look at nature as God's general revelation. So what I would say is that, and the interesting thing is that even the Bible actually says, even those people who do not know God have something in them that makes them to behave or to deal with, to observe what God is saying. So, for example, the Greeks wrote somewhere to the unknown God. They didn't know the God that we serve, but there's something within a human being who is created in the image of God that makes him realize where God is. So even those that do not know God, in one way or the other, they still follow certain things. They will still understand certain things that God is actually asking us to do.
No, definitely. Doctor, thank you so much for the knowledge you've given to us and the wisdom we've gained from what you've told us during this moment. We hope to get you more on this program so that you can impact the world at the time. Thank you so much and enjoy your day.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Angie.
Hi.
Yeah. So sorry for what is happening in America at the moment, but that is nature. We cannot do anything. So, Angie, what is your advice and suggestions to the world at the moment?
I think definitely taking into consideration the role we play as individuals within a collectivistic society, and what we can do and what we can how we can contribute to the slow of the spread. And I think as a teacher, really thinking about how we can best support our students emotionally right now, and also academically, and also specifically in the US, how you can talk about some really challenging topics regarding the civil unrest in the country, and helping students to understand the context behind our nation's history and why we are where we are right now.
So, Angie, what is the history you have for the world?
I think that a lot of Americans are ignorant to how this country was built and when it was built, and the systemic changes that are still in place right now that don't make it equal for everyone in this country. And that's true within our educational system, being funded by property taxes. And if you look at the history behind there, it's not fair for all of our students. And I think that if people choose to educate themselves and understand this, they would understand why there are so many protests that are happening for Black Lives Matter, and that COVID really has put a light on parts of America that need change.
All right, Angie, Definitely, we need change in our system all over the world. We need change, not only Americans. And thank you so much
Absolutely.
for your time and your impactation to the world at this moment. We hope to get you at a time on different issues altogether. Enjoy your day and stay safe, Andrew, because you are
Thank
precious
you.
to us. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Same to you.
All
Bye-bye.
right, bye. Hi, dear one. I hope you've really learned a lot from this program. I'm still reminding you that WOCON is a project at the moment, and our objective is to protect and prevent the world, the entire world, from present and future pandemic crisis. As Dr. just said, there are a lot that goes on in the term environment. Environment is a broader topic and a broader concept of field which we need to focus on, because without this concept we can move on in life. COVID-19 has caused a lot of damages, but we can't do anything. What we can do now is to protect the world and prevent our generation against this. We've got history for our generation. And the fourth, help me to get this objective at the higher standard of life. You can reach me on +4475852949110. I repeat, +4475852949110, or wocon2020@gmail.com. It's your host, Official Bene. I love you, and please stay safe. I'm born to serve the world, and that is what I'm doing. So I need your support and your everything. Thank you. See you next time.